Hello. Hello. We are ready to start. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Thomas Diaz. I will introduce myself later. Welcome to IAC, to the Institute for Advanced Architecture of Catalonia. Welcome to the Made Again conference that you will learn about in a few minutes. It's a pleasure for us to host you. Some of our partners are here today that are being part of a big journey that we are starting towards a possible future around local production, democratic design, sustainable future, and social fabrication. You're going to learn today about many things from many different fields of knowledge, from world-leading experts coming from around the world. But I would like to start first by saying that this has been a journey that we started maybe not even 9 months ago. And I'm looking to my right because I want to invite to join me Guillaume. Please come join me. Guillaume, I think I'm going to introduce you more formally later,
Okay.
but I just wanted you to give us a little bit of a warm welcome to the Made Again Challenge, which is not a workshop. It's a big project,
Yeah.
and it's more than a week that we are looking ahead. So please.
You know what? Actually, I think I'm going to talk about later. So why don't we save it a little? Just a quick word. We brought a bunch of very interesting people around here in Barcelona, and thank you, Thomas, and the whole team, and Yak and Fab Lab Barcelona for having us for those few days. We organized this conference because we're about to start a project, Made Again project, that we have worked on for the past few months. We're super excited. Formally, it hasn't started. It will tomorrow morning. So this is kind of a conference that was designed to set the stage of it. And I'm really excited to have the bunch of speakers on stage tonight to tell you about their point of view.
With that, and before introducing you more formally, I want to bring in someone that is also our partner. It's in the other side of the world. I beg your pardon because I need to connect to my Hangouts. We are going to step in the middle of a launch meeting, and you will know where. You can read it now, I guess. Hello, Neil.
Hi, Tomas.
Yes.
Great.
Welcome to Barcelona virtually. Thank you for joining us. You know what's going on. I think that without you, this wouldn't be possible today. I just want you to get in touch with the amazing people that is here in Barcelona starting this challenge in large project. And so the public is yours. We have around 150 people in the room. And so please.
That's great. Can you turn the camera so I can see who I'm talking to? That's great. Wow. So I'm particularly delighted. Let's see. Can you raise your hands if you're from IKEA? Okay. So here's why I'm delighted to say hello. You're joining in the middle of a weekly working lunch we have here. The reason I'm so pleased to see you is I talk about you a lot. Recapping things you may be familiar with, but just to quickly recap, computers went from analog to digital, communication went from analog to digital. MIT made the first computer-controlled manufacturing in 1952, but it's analog. We're joined by colleagues at Moog Aerospace Group, and one of the leading high-tech manufacturers. Computers design everything they make, but the machines don't put information into the material. They cut or squirt. The real future of fabrication is putting coding construction, digitizing fabrication at the level, not just of the design, but the materials. And we're progressing there in stages from having computers control machines to using machines to make machines, to then programming the materials. The Fab Labs began as outreach and spread virally. There's now about 1,000, doubling every year and a half. We're pivoting from 1.0, buying a Fab Lab, to 2.0. So Nadia Peak joining me is one of the leads on how Fab Labs will make Fab Labs. So if you want a new one, you go to an existing Fab Lab. Initially, we thought that meant using the existing machines to make similar machines. It's turned into something much more profound, which is rapid prototyping machines with object-oriented hardware that lets you compose physical modules to make machine modules. And to do that, we've had to redo the whole stack of CAD, CAM, machine control, motion control. Now, to relate it back to IKEA, Fab Labs have been doubling for a decade. You're joined by Sherry Lassiter at the back of the table, who runs the Fab Foundation. They look from up there. To keep up with that growth, once a year, all these labs meet. As you probably know, 2 years ago, we all came to Barcelona. Tomas's colleague, Vicente Gallart, was the city architect. His buddy, Trias, was the mayor. Great design sense, 50% youth unemployment, the economy was broken. And so that started this project, setting up labs as part of urban infrastructure. The city provides electricity or clean water, now it provides the means to make stuff for sustainability. And that's unpacking to this whole range of technologies for transportation, energy, food, sustainably produced locally. Last summer at Boston, Tomas coordinated the leadership of Boston, Somerville, and Cambridge, as well as a number of cities around the world joining this Fab City commitment. 40 years to self-sufficiency, not protectionism, but the idea is today Barcelona is a product in, trash out conversion device. Both come to the harbor with containers, trash truck goes to the dump, and the city turns the products into trash. They want it to be a data in, data out device. So the atoms stay, but the bits come and go. Not protectionism, globally connected for knowledge, but self-sufficiency locally to make what it consumes. Goal is 1% in 1 year and 40 years to complete self-sufficiency. And so each of the things I'm describing is happening at the same time, but with longer and longer time horizons. But this goal of cities being able to sustainably produce what they consume locally is then leading to a pivot. The next meeting in the series is in Shenzhen in August. And Sherry and Nadia and I were up at 7:45 to meet with this whole Chinese team. We're Shenzhen, where much of the world's stuff gets made. We have a dream team of the leadership of China, the big companies in China, the scrappy little companies in China, and the maker communities all pivoting, recognizing that if Barcelona makes what it consumes, you don't need China to make Barcelona's products. But so processors or things like that. It's many years before Will gets far enough to make those in the city, and we'll talk about that over lunch. And so you need this pivot from mass to personal manufacturing. And so Fab 12 in China is all about that. So now to come back to IKEA, something I say whenever I talk about this is to say, ha, IKEA, anything you see in a big box IKEA store, we can make in the Fab Lab. And so instead of IKEA dividing what people want and shipping it at a distance, we can do it locally. And that's about as far as I get in introspecting about IKEA. But the reason I'm so delighted to meet is we're working very closely with a number of really interesting partners, like Nike for sportswear, or Philips for lighting, or Google, who are really big companies, but working on these decade-long arcs where rather than big versus small, really thinking about how you integrate them. So with Google, we did the Project Ara phone, which is a phone where instead of the phone being a fixed thing, you can recompose it to make different things. And Nike is doing this all hands on deck push to be zero waste, completely closed cycle production, where the production is sustainably and crucially local instead of shipping at a distance. And so outside Boston, when personal computers came, the whole mini computer industry failed. In the same sense, much of mid-tier manufacturing is on track to fail. 2 years ago, Sherry, Nadia, and I ran a lab at the White House. We'll be back there next week. And it's about largely the new jobs aren't coming back to the old factories. But we still have mainframes. They're more important than ever. In the same sense, the skills of these really big global companies are neat, but it's not top-down versus bottom-up. It's this really interesting synthesis of how you merge distributed bottom-up with top-down. And so in that, I refer to IKEA casually as a straw man, but I'm delighted to look beyond that and really think about how what you do relates to what we do. And everything I just said, Tomas understands as well as anyone, and so he'll be a great guide to curate that discussion.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you very much. I think we can give it a hand. Yeah. So now, this is the...
Yep. For time, let me not take questions, but let me invite you to continue the discussion.
We're going to go ahead with the conference. Thank you very much for setting up the stage. And see you soon. Bye, everyone. Ciao, Nadia.
Ciao.
Ciao, Terry. Ciao. Okay. So that was Neil Gershenfeld. He's the father of Fab Labs, for you that don't know. And now I have the pleasure, the immense pleasure, to introduce someone that actually is almost like a soulmate. But as I was saying, 9 months ago, I got the pleasure to know Guillaume Charny-Brunet, who is the Chief Innovation Officer of Space 10. I could say many things about him, but I can only share give my thoughts after working with him on all these months and all the energy and the passion that he puts on what he does. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about the Made Again Challenge and a little bit about interesting moments in time when convergences happened. And Guillaume, I would like to invite you to the stage. Thank you.
Hey. Do you know where the presentation is? Hello, everyone. I've been talking a lot today. I even begin to get tired of hearing myself. I apologize for all the others that were here today with me. I'm talking again. But I'm really happy to see all of you. It is a little tough, to tell you the truth, to discuss the future of fabrication right after Neil, father of all Fab Labs, from MIT and everything, but I'm going to give it a shot. So after Neil, yes, talking about the future, I think what I want to do is start going all prehistorical on you first. We've always made, you know. We've made since we're able to think. This is actually an object that is about 10,000 years old that was made in the Mesolithic, to tell you the truth. It's interesting because it's the time where people started to settle down, to grow things. And if you notice, that object has a little bit of decorations. People started to care and to make things. It's an object that it's called an adze. It's actually a woodworking object, which here actually makes has quite a purpose. What the point is that when we started making, we did kind of make in the same way for centuries and centuries. You know, this is David Hutgen, and he's kind of the Mozart of cabinetry, and he's a German ebonist. What he's done here is it's called a transformer, or some people call it a transformer cabinet. And what it does is it's quite amazing, you know. It still works after almost 300 years old, right? And you basically press a drawer and it opens quite magically. There's all kind of hidden compartments. You put it together and boom, it unfolds into some kind of a magical firework, and it's awesome. The other thing is that it's completely disassemblable. You can take it apart and bring it back together. It's kind of an ancestor of IKEA. And it was made by this guy and his son, and it was disassemblable because it needed to be shipped to the emperors and the kings of that time all across Europe. But that's pretty much, you know, the story of making from 8,000 years before Jesus Christ up to that period. So that's the 18th century. People were making one object at the time, perfecting techniques, using the materials they had available. In that case, it's wood and metal. But before it was bones, And that's the story of making for almost 10,000 years until someone invented mass production. You know, the moving assembly line is attributed to Ford, and that one is from 1913, sorry. But what is very interesting is what led to that shift, I think. And I have a passion for this period of history. I'm French, so it's also the only time in history where we can truly be proud of ourselves. So allow me to explain a little bit. It is, La Belle Époque actually means literally the beautiful age. And it's kind of a fantastic 40 years old that have completely shaped the way we live today, the way we make things. It's a fantastic period where people had a religion of progress. They had hope in peace. They had belief in science. And they had no engineers not working with artists. The word designer didn't exist yet. The word maker didn't exist yet. But everyone was kind of a designer and everyone was kind of a maker in building that fantastic time. 40 years is very little compared to the time we saw the ads. But we'll get back to that later. So La Belle Époque is a time of gigantism. The Eiffel Tower is 3 times higher than the highest building built over there. This is the Titanic. We all know the tragic story. That bowl here is actually the very first 360 movie theater, and that is just a couple of years after movies were actually invented by the Lumiere brothers. It's a time where cities actually played a huge role into fostering innovation. The whole city of Paris in 1900 was completely transformed to host 51 million visitors within 6 months. And at the time, the entire kingdom of France, or France, the republic, was already a republic since a long time, but the entire France was 40 million. Half of the people that came to this World Fair, they traveled for months from all across the world, and everyone was meeting here. It's a time where we don't have internet, and we don't have communications that are efficient or accessible to the masses. The only way you could actually see science, hear about science and innovation, was a time where you needed to go there and touch it and feel it. And the city of Paris completely changed. It says on this poster here that it has 100 million visitors. Actually, they did sold 100 million tickets, but only 51 could get in. That was like a big scam, apparently. French people. Anyway, gigantism. This is the largest vaulted building ever built. I'm talking about it because it hosted, it's called the Palace of Machines, and it hosted all the machines you could find at that time. All the manufacturers in the world would come here and present their innovations. It was a building that was so high that you could fly balloons in there. It has still today no equivalent in terms of architecture. And it was just bring up and then down just a couple of years after the end of the this World Fair in 1900. What makes this time very, very interesting is that there was no distinction between science, architecture, art. Everyone was an artist, and the motto at the time was art everywhere. And if you look at this, this is the subway at the time, and you'll see that every screws and every bolt at that time of every building had flowers in it, and it's like the beginning of the big Art Deco time. Eiffel actually was one of those genius makers. We all know him for his beautiful and fantastic architectural chef-d'oeuvre. But he also did a few things that had a very big impact on the world. He actually invented suspenders. And it turns out that the legend says it's just his wife that was annoyed at having stockings coming down and just summoned him to find a solution for it. And he just looked into it and invented that thing that actually stayed. It's a wonderful time of innovations. This car over there is called the Never Happy, literally. And it's the first car that went over 100 kilometers per hour. And it is an electrical car. We're in 1900. The cinema was invented at that time. And 1 year after it was invented, it was in all capitals of the world, including Sydney. That's pretty fast, you know? That thing is pretty amazing. All around the center of Paris, people could hop on a moving sidewalk and just be carried around the whole city from one point of the exhibition to another. Here's what I wanted to show you. Number of innovation per period of time. This has no equivalent in the world. Those 40 years have seen the birth of so many things, such as the telephone, the car, the fax machine, the cinema, photography, vaccines, aspirin, soap, shampoo, not soap, etc., etc. And it was a fantastic period that was built on the first industrial revolution, a period where we started to have access to the things we needed to build that generations of exceptional innovation. And the first industrial revolution was very much around, steam and water power, about metallurgy, and it was about building the means for mass transportation of goods. And it allowed us to unleash this wonderful wave of innovation. That's the boat. It took 15 years from the moment steamboats appeared to make cargoes that size who could actually ship things all around the world. I want to talk about this quickly and the role of cities in the development of this. We think today that the world is changing very, very fast, don't we? Now imagine this. In 40 years, you see each of those industries, each of those inventions, almost creating industries the size of the internet. 40 years is actually the age of the internet. The ARPANET, it was called at the time. So we had to be very creative as a city. Everywhere in the world it happened, or in major cities. This is called the Palace of Electricity. And on top of it sits the fairy electricity. And you had to create those amazing places to show the wonder of science and engineering and invite the people in. Those places were all around Paris and European capitals to explain how it works, what it is, and make people part of that change. Here you have the Palace of Mines and Metallurgy. Here you have the Palace of Optics, which, by the way, in 1900 carried this humongous, the biggest lens in the world, and projected a real-time image of the moon that was completely unseen, gigantic, So we had the Palace of Costume, Palace of Textiles, Palace of Women, Palace of Medicine, etc., etc. And everyone could go in and go out. And that mix, between common people, between tinkerers, between engineers, architects, artists, created a humongous wave also of business and entrepreneurship. This is actually where that word was invented, entrepreneurship. You might not know it, but Nintendo was invented and created in 1889. We would believe it started with the Game Boy in the 80s, but no. Most of those big companies were created there, and there's no equivalent in history neither of how many of this such amount of brands. Such amount of brands that, we usually talk about Ford, to present mass production and the birth of it. I'd like to talk about another one, Singer, which is 13 years younger than Ford, and brought millions of those machines to the many people, allowing them to sew themselves, empowering women, etc. And it's very funny to look at why. In 1889, they got the gold medal at one of those world fairs. And 10 years after, they sold 2 million pieces all around the world. And they invented business models such as the one in the middle on the top. It says pay 3 francs per week. So you split payment, and that's how also you actually change everything. So in order to go volume, they had to go nuts on the size of the factories, and they hired a lot of people. Of course, not everything was great, Powering all these things required coal. You had child labor in the coal, etc., etc. But those workers here were happy. On average, at that time in factories, workers would earn 50% more money than they would before that. And they would actually work less, 6 hours per day less. That's 1,000 hours a year. That's a lot. It also enabled people to have access to, money to spend and to consume, and brands to be motivated to make more products and more products. This is a bunch of everyday objects that were created during that time, from toasters to chewing gums to pens to ketchup. That time, those 40 years, they actually really opened up the door for us to consume the way we consume. And we have produced kind of the same way, with those assembly lines, wherever they're placed since then. And it's not that long, it's a century ago, a little bit, 100 years ago. And in 100 years, we've produced more and more and more and more. The same way, a very linear way. A way where we take resources, raw materials from the mines, we make objects, we use objects, and we dispose of objects. And that's what that world actually created, this linear thinking of objects. But today, it is said that we don't really have a choice anymore. If we carry on using the Earth's resources at the current rate of increase, we'll need 3 planets by 2050, as if it was even a choice, you know? So we created the Made Again Challenge because we really think it is time to rethink the way we make. And it has enormous value for brands. Many studies show that treating waste as resources today will bring enormous business opportunities and different ways of doing things. We've got to rethink the paradigm of consumerism and production. That's what it is. Waste no more is the key. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation talks a lot about circular economy and has put a lot of documentation out there. And it's the story of, or the vision of that system that produces no waste and no pollutions. A system in which biological material can re-enter the biosphere without harming anything, and the technical material can be recycled all the time. It's a system that is actually very, very, very complex to put in place, but it is the vision. It requires that a lot of people work together. It requires that we learn to make projects that are made to be made again. It requires that we build systems that are powered by sustainable, renewable energy. It requires that we start using new materials that are either recycled, made of waste, or that are grown. When you look at this big picture, it's kind of, it feels like there's still a lot to be done before we arrive to a point where the economy is circular and we can live again in harmony with the resources that the planet has to offer and the demand of the many, many people that today want to access the same kind of level of life that we have built. The Made Again Challenge is an attempt to look into that future now. It's an attempt to explore how we can make progress towards that vision of a circular economy with what we have today. And what we have today is new fabrication methods. Walk around here, you'll see it's just everywhere. We can have access today to machines that are easier to manipulate, that are a lot more accessible and enable people to make almost anything. We have new democratic tools. We're talking about open source design. Joni is going to talk about that a lot. Francis later is going to talk actually a lot about the power of digital manufacturing. But new democratic tools, they range all the way from open source platforms, designs, and tools, then to the access for anyone today to just in a couple of clicks, create a web shop, market yourself, sell, and ship things out. We also have new playgrounds. This, the first in the European Union, is one of the many Fab Labs that have mushroomed in the past 10 years. And places are popping out everywhere. What we're thinking when we built the Made Again Challenge was that maybe we could unite those resources and think about a way to not put products that have reached the end of their lives in the consumer views in the landfills. We're thinking about ways where we can use new creative forces, new technologies that are available today to remake or redistribute or reuse those furniture. There's actually the work of Kel Goldsworthy, and a design by Franklin Till. That sums up exactly perfectly what we don't want to do at the Made Again Challenge. Upcycling by design. Learning how we can use materials that are available in abundance, that are treated today as waste, and start designing for product to be made again. We really believe that this change will not be based on competitions, and that it will be based on open collaborations. And that is why we built the Made Again Challenge, together with Space 10, our team, with the Fab City Research Lab, YAC, many other people, IKEA, of course. And the idea was quite simple. We bring people together from the industry, people from maker spaces, from Fab Lab, from cities. And we think about this. Affordable should not mean disposable. So what we started doing is collecting furniture on the streets, furniture that were on their way to the landfills. And then we started digging around and reaching out to startups or companies that are actually already building business on making new sustainable furniture material, either growing them or recycling the unrecyclable, making plastics that are beautiful and useful and usable with those machines. This is a Pinatex. It's a leather-looking material that is made of a pineapple leaf. All these materials we will have access to. Oh, and I want to mention EcoHalf as well, who is an amazing local company here from Spain that is making textile out of recycled plastic, but also has this amazing and very meaningful partnership with fishermen on the west coast of Spain, who are incentivized to keep what they take in their net as plastics and give it back to them so they can make that textile. We have access to amazing resources, but most importantly, we have gathered here amazing people. 8 IKEA designers, 8 ambassadors, people that we have spotted and handpicked from all around the world that come with amazing experience, and 12 local makers, people that call Barcelona home, that make for a living, that share this passion. And actually, I'm thinking now, all of those 28 people that are part of this, and they should all be called ambassadors. Because what we really want to do is to look into a potential future of production, a future that could answer this question that we asked ourselves a few months ago. What if IKEA tomorrow could have factories inside each cities? What if those furniture could be made on demand with materials that are accessible in abundance, materials that are sustainable? What if all of this could be powered with sustainable energies? And we looked into this and we thought, okay, instead of talking into it, let's just do it. There's a big mistake here because it's not 1,000 square meters. 1,000 square meters is the size of this place here. We created an amazing Fab City prototype that is 1 square kilometer. 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer, where 28 participants from so many different horizons will work together with sustainable material to give a second chance to those furniture. And it's not just about hacking. It really is about thinking with our hands together, bringing around the same table people with so much different backgrounds and math skills, people that can actually look into how we can design for circularity, how we can start using sustainable material, grown material for mass production, and start looking into it with a real appetite for it. And that's pretty much what the Made Again project is. Thank you. And now I would like to invite on stage Mikel and Hannah. Mikel and Hannah are both designers at IKEA. And they're going to tell us a little bit about what it means and how things are done, how you at IKEA make products for the many people. Talk about democratic design. I leave it to them to tell you more. Do you have two, or can we? What? Oh, I couldn't see how it's from. My computer? You can hold on it. Okay.
Hi everyone, my name is Hannah and I'm here today with my colleague Michael. and we're going to talk about IKEA and how we work with our design philosophy, democratic design. We both work as in-house designer at IKEA in Älmhult in Sweden. Yes.
Yeah, and at IKEA we're not just making things, we're making things better. And democratic means that we want our offer to be available for as many people as possible. And we also want to create products that we and our customers love. And we achieve that by using democratic design and the 5 dimensions within democratic design, which is form, function, quality, sustainability, and form. And it's really important to use all 5 of those dimensions. So it's not just enough with only form or function.
So if you take a look around, there are obviously things that we can make better on every level. And we can use design to improve things. To work at IKEA means to work in a team. As designers, we work together with product developers and technicians. And every project starts out with a brief. And from the first sketch to the final product, we use democratic design as a tool. So according to democratic design, we go into all small details in all parts of the design process.
So what we do and how we do things is of course dependent on our vision and our reason to be. And we want to create a better everyday life for the many people. And that's why we make better products that are affordable. That's why we work with iWay, our code of conduct. That's why we work with the IKEA Foundation. That's why we engage with the communities where we are active and so on. It's all in the why. And so everything we do because we want to create a better everyday life for the many people. So for us as designers, that means that we constantly working on products that improves people's lives or make it easier.
So what we do is the same as many others, but how we do it differs a lot. And it is like that because of who we are, how we think and what we believe, because we have to gather for the many individuals. But that is not really true, because we are more ambitious than most due to low price. IKEA never cut corners or take the easy way out. Instead, we are open to the world, always ready to make drastic changes to make things better for our customers, which means making things better for IKEA in the long run. And doing what is better always was hard work, but we think it turned out quite good.
So democratic designs manifests our business idea. And the business idea is to offer a wide range of well-functional products, well-designed, to a price so that as many people as possible can afford them. And democratic designs operates in every part of our concept. And the IKEA concept is the aim is to shorten the distance between the customer and the supplier. And we try to do that by using the opportunities of the suppliers together with the needs of the customers. So and how we achieve this? I mean, design has always been the way that we achieve things at IKEA in the past, and it will be in the future as well. So let's go through the 5 dimensions of democratic design.
So the first dimension is form. And to visualize that, we've brought some products that we have designed for the next PS collection that will be launched in February 17. I have designed this wearable blanket. I think I should. And Michael has designed this room divider. And the starting point for the whole collection was to work with comfort and to create comfort in a new way. At IKEA, we want to make the world more beautiful, and we let the Scandinavian style add beauty to our products. This wearable blanket is like a mix between fashion and a product, which makes it pretty unique for IKEA. When I worked with a form, I wanted to make a clean expression, both in the details and the materials. And the color and the patterns is inspired by the Scandinavian nature. And when the majority of people make beauty matter, the whole world becomes more beautiful and a better place to live, visually and emotionally. And form is not only about the beauty of each thing, but how much better life at home becomes when it's beautiful and makes you feel good.
Yeah, and the next dimension is function. And function is all about making everyday life easier. So, for example, if you look at the room divider, we could just have had two legs and a single textile in between, and then we would have created a screening function. But instead, we wanted to add functions. So instead we had a felt that is shaped as an accordion, and that way you get a sound absorbing function as well. And at the same time, the shape creates the form and the expression that we wanted. And this is often the way it is when you work with all dimensions, and they end up strengthen each other. In this case, the form strengthens the function, and vice versa. And since we want to make life easier for people, it's really important for us to know how people live. And we know that many people live in small spaces. So then it's really important to be able to rearrange a room for these different occasions and activities. So we made the legs longer and added handles. So then it's really easy to just move it around and rearrange the room, basically. So, and it's not only about how each object works, it's also about how much better it makes life at home work in total.
So then we have the quality. And quality, of course, is very important to us. We want our product to be safe, built to last, and designed for a purpose. When I work with my design, I go into all details and like how can I attach this zipper in the best way? And how will the product be used and what material is best for that purpose? For example, this material is a little bit shiny, which makes it easy to clean. And quality is not only about how durable each thing is or 10 years guarantees, but about how much better things become if home stands the wear and tear of every day.
Okay. So the environment and the human sustainability goes through our whole process. And we feel a big responsibility across the whole value chain. And we also want to enable people to live a more sustainable life at home. Because a lot of small things making world better, then we will have a really big change at the end. If you look at the room divider, for example, it consists of two materials, metal and polyester, and they're really easy to recycle. Both of them are recyclable, and you can just remove the felt from the. And we work with suppliers that are really good at recycling. For example, we work with suppliers that can recycle felt or polyester felt. And both this is made of polyester, and also Hannah's wearable throw is made out of polyester. And sustainability is not only about making each product as good as possible for the environment. It's also about making products that enable people to live more sustainable at home.
And the last thing is the price. At IKEA, we work with affordable prices. Good design should be available on all price levels for all people. We always start to design the price tag, and then we find solutions to keep the price low. So low price doesn't mean bad quality. And when many people afford to make things better, then everyone can live more freely and break away from norm and conventions. And low price is not only about the price of each thing, but about affording to make things better.
So this is the 5 dimensions of democratic design: form, function, quality, sustainability, and price. And it's really easy to make or design a product with only one of those dimensions in mind. For example, it's really easy to make a super nice, super expensive sofa. But if you try to make a super nice sofa with a low price tag, then it gets way more complicated. And the trick is to always use all 5 of the dimensions all the time. And that's something that very few can pull off. And I hope that you know now have a clearer picture on how we work at IKEA with democratic design. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I keep this? Like a. That was really easy. So now I feel very lucky because I used to work with incredible people, and I find on that way soulmates all the time. I feel like one of the luckiest people in the world, actually. I have a job that is not a job. And that leads to actually one very special person I work with. I have been working for almost a year now at the Royal College of Arts. He's a designer, it's a maker, but he's a really thoughtful person, and he's going to talk about the design decision making. I take this lead to introduce James Tooth, and come to stage. Thanks, man, for joining us. Yeah, so yeah, my name's James Tooth. I'm a tutor at the Royal College of Art in London. I'm a researcher, I'm a designer, I'm a maker, and I like to kind of poke people to do things. So I just want to say thank you for the invitation to be here from EAC and from Space 10. And I'm going to kind of talk about some of the things that underpin design decision making. And what I want to do is try and distinguish between design ideas and how we turn ideas into things, and kind of decisions or the underpinning ethos that may shape how we design. So we've created this amazing system. So Guillaume set this kind of picture up. We've got the most sophisticated production distribution system that's ever been created in history. If you think about it, I kind of sit on the sofa in the morning and I'm eating banana muesli with my coffee. I've got my Nike trainers on. I've got my cotton t-shirt. I'm living in a globalized world. I've got all of this stuff that I've got no connection to where it's made. In fact, I don't even know where it's made. And what that also brings with it is the distribution of unwanted goods. So we've got this system where, Neil mentioned it as well. He talks about it kind of product in and trash out. But it's not just trash to the refuse dump. We've got the most inefficient system with dealing with material that's ever been created in the history of the world. We've got the distribution of byproducts. So if we don't want it, we get rid of it. This is kind of how we get rid of it. We just pump it into somewhere else. But the problem is we live on a finite planet. There is no somewhere else. So in doing that, we also distribute the risk. So what we try and do is we offset it onto people that either can't afford or don't have the opportunity to make the decisions. So what this is an e-waste dump in India. So this is the kind of amalgamation of multiple risks. Risk to life, risk to kind of the economic well-being in now and in the future. So this is not just the kind of a dump of heavy metals. This is the kind of mitigation of any, or the kind of damage of the future of the people that live here. And then we've got this kind of distribution of the impact where we don't really know what we're doing. So yeah, we know how to design things, we know how to make things, but we don't really know what we're doing, and we don't know what the long-term consequences are. I mean, we're starting to see them, and this challenge and the kind of conversations that need to be happening are happening, but we need to then start seeing how they might affect the framework for businesses, the framework for government or governance. So I want to talk really briefly about one of the ways in which we educate students at the RCA. So Thomas and I run a platform together called Exploring Emergent Futures. The largest future that we face is the kind of imminent pushing of all kind of planetary boundaries. So that's a fairly significant thing to be thinking about as product designers. It kind of blows your mind. So, but also what's interesting is we have the opportunity to redesign everything. So, okay, so it's a big challenge, but it's kind of cool to be a designer because we get to think about pretty much everything. But what underpins the process that we have is ethos. So we start with students, we don't necessarily give them challenges to design things. We work on a master's program. I like to think we select the best and we make them better. And we do that by getting them to think about what matters to them. So ethos underpins everything. So what does it mean? What means something to them? And this is my kind of argument in terms of design decision making. We really need to cut to the chase. We need to get to the underlying ethos. And the challenge in this is the balance between economic interests and long-term interests, because they aren't necessarily synced particularly well. So I like to kind of think about this guy. So Buckminster Fuller, he wrote a whole load of stuff. He said a whole load of stuff, but this quote cuts through it all. You know, we are called upon to be architects of the future, not its victims. And part of this kind of building block of thinking about the future is thinking about new systems models. So I'm really lucky to have worked with the guys that created this. So it's the RSA's Great Recovery Project. I work alongside Nat Hunter, who works on the research projects that we're doing at the RCA. And this kind of new systems thinking that, you know, Guillaume also touched on in the Ellen MacArthur work is to think about not necessarily an alternate model to the linear economy, but as many different models that are going to work together as possible. So if we take this and we think about, you know, we're trying to keep materials in use as long as possible, or objects in use. We want to think about service models. We want to think about how we can recapture pieces of things, so components for remanufacture, and if it comes to it, and this is the key thing, if it comes to it, we recycle the material, but it shouldn't be our go-to. So what, you know, Thomas and I have been talking about is the idea of the spiral economy, or certainly in terms of the spiral life of something. So it's about trying to keep something in life as long as possible, and then do the least amount of work in order to give it a new life. And seeing this as a kind of long-term trajectory for things. So yeah, we need to reimagine what we're doing. So it kind of brings me to this. So in 1976, Lucas Aerospace had an issue, and that issue was economic. So the 1970s in the UK were pretty bleak. We had significant damage to our industrial infrastructure through basically a price war between us and the rest of the world. And also a redundancy in technology and a kind of lack of foresight. So the Lucas plan was a reimagining of Lucas Aerospace by the workforce. So by the unions and by the workforce to think about moving from what was a 50%, a company that made 50% military goods to socially useful production. So the workers together over a period of 6 months innovated and basically worked out, okay, so we've got skills, we've got machines, and we've got this kind of aptitude to think about making stuff or think about things. So they created a whole catalog of new products. And the reason I want to think about, or I want you to think about it, I've been thinking about it, is that we can take companies that have capacity and we can reimagine them. And what we really got to do is now think about not just socially useful production, but environmentally sustainable, long-term environmentally sustainable and socially useful production. But then this also reminds me of another designer that I love, Enzo Mari, and And this is a quote from an interview that I can't remember where it came from, but it doesn't really matter because, you know, that sticks with me. Design is a process of negotiation. And what happens in negotiation is you have to get to the crux of something. You have to know what you're negotiating between. And when you make compromises, you've got to know what gets compromised. So I just want to show a kind of case study project. So I've got nothing to do with this. I wasn't involved in this, but I just love the project. So this is by a design consultancy in London called Agency of Design. And they wanted to design out waste. So they chose one product, the toaster, and they created 3 variations, 3 possibilities. So the first one is called the Optimist. So it's designed to last for generations. It's made from aluminium, which can be easily recyclable. Basically you don't lose the material, and it's lower energy than you would do if you were actually producing virgin aluminium. And it was also designed so that kind of, if anything could break, and they kind of think that nothing could break, but if, you can repair it. This is called the Pragmatist. So this was designed to directly connect the manufacturer with the consumer, so creating ongoing material flows. And that was done in a way by creating something that was modular, recognizing that someone might want a 1-slot toaster and someone else might want a 10-slot toaster. But it was also designed so that it could be sent back in the post. So thinking about the kind of practice, the kind of activity that, or the kind of thing that a consumer might need to be able to do. So it's not limited by its size. And then the last one is called the Realist, which is, okay, so people want a cheap toaster. So this is the $4.99 or, you know, €6 equivalent. This is designed so that in a vacuum chamber, it all pops apart. So it's designed in order to fit within a closed circular economy model, where the people who make it are the people who take it back, or at least there's a relationship. So this gets to something that I want to advocate, which is it's time to kill the idea of the consumer product. The idea that we can consume products is ridiculous. They are materials that do not go into our body and are not biodegradable, so we should stop consuming them. So I'm going to argue that we need to be architects of the future, and we need to make for custodians of products and of materials and not for consumers. So thank you very much.
While we set him up, I would like to call on stage Samuel Bernier. Samuel Bernier is an industrial designer, a maker, a hacker, and much more. And just for the record, here's how I heard about Samuel Bernier. It was 2 years ago, and a lot of people on the internet were talking about IKEA hackers, right? Start looking into this, and then somehow on the web pops up a legend of someone who one day made a bicycle out of frosted stools for kids. And turns out to be him. Since then, we've talked a lot, and today he's going to talk to us about is there room for DIY in the world we live in?
Hello, everyone. So if I tell you that I'm an industrial designer, what is your first thought? What do you think of? Yeah. So believe it or not, others in the room will approve. A lot of times when I tell someone that I'm an industrial designer, what first comes to his mind is he must be designing beautiful factories, which of course is completely wrong. So just to explain what industrial designers do, these are some of the questions I ask. Do you own a toaster? Raise your hand if you own a toaster. I do own one, but a lot of people. Good. Now, do you own a bicycle? Well, a lot of people too. And if they answer no to these 2 questions, I ask a third question. Do you own or use on a daily basis a toothbrush? And this is the moment where everybody should raise their hand, okay? So an industrial designer created these objects for you. and so much more, from the running shoes I'm wearing to the cars in the street. And that, of course, goes through learning every single manufacturing process and material available for production. A lot of people, without knowing it, accountants, business developers, always wanted to be industrial designers. And every profession at some point in its history has been revolutionized by new tools and new invention. As Guillaume said it, the sewing machine revolutionized the clothing industry. The invention of the tractor boosted agriculture. It changed the face of agriculture. And even just the invention of the camera, photography, it reinvented art and documentation. All of these tools had one major point in common. They were getting the job done faster. For industrial design, this game changer came in the early digital age with the creation of CAD modeling, a computer-aided tool that enabled designers to create digital drawings. This invention opened the door to thousands of other technologies to emerge, and one of them being additive manufacturing, born in the mid-'80s. This is a technology you might know better under its common name nowadays, well, 3D printing. There is more than one additive manufacturing technique in use today. There's actually a lot more. They all have boring 3-letter acronyms like FDM, SLS, SLA, DLP, 3DP, MGM, PolyJet, so on. They use different tools like extruders, blades, different from different type of materials like powders, plastics, UV cured resins, and even paper for some of them. But they all share a similar function. They add thin layers of material on top of each other to create 3D objects. There's 3 major advantages of building this way compared to other traditional industrial processes. First of all, with additive manufacturing, you don't need a mold, which means that you can produce completely unmoldable objects, meaning a lot more design freedom. You can actually create 1,000 different objects with the same machine without having to modify it a bit. This is the closest opportunity we got to real mass customization, a world where any object can be custom made to the client's needs and tastes. Second, with additive manufacturing, you can produce objects without any need for assembly. Different volumes can be built simultaneously, but keeping their movement independence. I usually have an object with me at this moment that I just take out of my pocket and just like telescopic like this, but sorry, I forgot it. Last but not least, to me, it's one of the biggest opportunity with additive manufacturing is that it enables distributed manufacturing. So imagine a world where whenever you have to build an object, you can produce it at any place equipped with a 3D printer and electricity. This virtually means no packaging, no transport, no storage. And most of all for me, that means no middleman between the designer, the creator, and the final user. For the first time, these two people can interact and give each other feedback to make the product better. Now imagine a world where whenever one of your objects breaks, your toaster, your IKEA chair, you just have to go on the manufacturer's online catalog, Google, find an improved part to download and 3D print so you can fix it yourself. Well, doesn't that sound awesome? Does it seem too good to be true to some of you? I guess. Well, there's some truth in this, because there's some details or some downsides to additive manufacturing that I haven't mentioned yet. Because of course, since each layer of material is so thin, the manufacturing process can be very slow and sometimes also quite expensive, which is probably one of the reasons why for the first 30 years of its existence, well, more 25 years of its existence, this technology has been mainly used for product prototyping to make copies of objects that were later meant bigger machines. Until the arrival around 2005 of these type of machines. They came from the RepRap project. They were mainly built from standard components, a lot by engineering students and hobbyists. These machines did cost around $500 to make. To put you in context, when I was a student in 2005, I had access to the 3D printer, but the machine itself was a $30,000 machine, and a single spool of material was the price of this machine. So this gap enabled designers like me to own some of these machines. To put you in context also, back when these machines arrived on the market, let's say, the most popular 3D printing file you could find on several platforms was a plastic Yoda head. Yeah, the character from Star Wars. So hardly the shape of things to come. Like people seeing that or not saying, oh, 3D printing is going to change the world. Of course not. But in 2012, machines inspired by the RepRap project started to emerge, coming to the market around $1,000, really enabling industrial designers like me to own one. And I was doing my final project in the subject of DIY in the digital age. And it only made sense that I would explore the possibilities allowed by a 24/7 access to one of these machines. So I managed to get one, and I installed it in my living room. And it didn't please my girlfriend. For my first project, what I wanted to do with this new tool, this new machine, was to extend the life of products by giving them new functions. So I looked around my apartment. I realized that I had a lot of tin cans and pickle jars around that I wasn't using anymore. So I decided I would design some new special lids for them that would give these objects new purposes. Some of them became piggy banks, birdhouses, even dumbbells, and a juicer. It was called Project Re. Once the first part of the collection was launched, I put it on open source for free download on the internet, and it got an instant response from the people. This is when I realized that it was one of the first time that somebody had used these desktop machines, this desktop technology, for domestic purpose. From this moment, 3D printing became a real addiction for me. This little machine that I actually called Clementine, like very personal with it, started following me everywhere. I used it on all type of projects. I was bringing it with me on the weekend at the cabin, helping my father fix his boat. I even used it very large amount of time to improvise birthday presents because I had forgotten about the birthday, sometimes my own girlfriend. And it became like part of my life. I was using 3D printing to fix things, to make, of course, prototype, but to just explore my full imagination outside of the borders that my 7 years of studying industrial design taught me about injection molding and all the other processes. One day of summer in 2012, the IKEA lampshade in the middle of my living room ripped in half beyond repair. It was one of those $40 Regalit lamp, you know, the one that's like a big fishing rod with a big cloud of paper. So yeah, this cloud of paper ripped in half. I could have bought another lampshade, but it was the price of the whole set, and I wanted to keep the rest of the set. It was still fully functional. So I designed I designed a new lampshade, and I sent it to the 3D printer. And the next morning, I had a new lampshade. It was quite satisfying, but they decided to repeat the process once and twice, and I ended up making a new design every evening for a month. And I didn't need that many lampshades, of course. So I made a tutorial and shared it on internet. Next morning, I had an article in Wired talking about my project of how I made my own lampshade to replace the IKEA lampshade that broke in my house. Of course, having an article in Wired, I also ended up having hundreds of emails in my mailbox of people wanting to buy these lamps, which was a huge problem because I only had my tiny 3D printer, and a single lampshade took me 12 hours to produce. Well, I didn't really try to find a way to solve this problem because at this moment I knew there was a bright future ahead for me as an industrial designer specialized in design for 3D printing. And I dedicated the next 4 years trying to bring this technology out of the prototyping zone and to the functional object world. Ironically, years later, one of the most popular and downloaded 3D printing file on the internet today is still another kind of useless toy, but at least it features some of the 3D printing assets. It's this little elephant. And this little elephant is 3D printed hollow without any support and fully assembled, which means that you take it out of the 3D printer, a kid can print it, and it's ready to be played with. Of course, I'm the one who designed it, and now everywhere I go, it can be in San Francisco or in Italy, I'm presented as the guy who designed this elephant. As creative director of the Fab Shop in the past year, I've worked on large amounts of projects, a lot of them being additive manufacturing researches for large company, sometimes doing some corporate hacking, being the Trojan horse getting into the company to change the way they work, sometimes processes that haven't changed in 100 years. But I realized that sometimes some of the projects that had the most impact on the way we see this technology today in our daily lives were some of the projects I was doing on the side for fun, some of my personal projects. They went from parametric connectors allowing people to design their own furniture, to fun and open source concepts, inviting kids to play with vegetables before they learn how to cook them with their parents. One Christmas holiday, I found this project on Core 77, and I found it quite interesting. It was a student project from a student in Zurich, and he was making kind of funky furniture out of frosted stools. And I contacted this guy. I was like, oh, I like the way you work. I like your IKEA hacking. And of course, my lamp project was already introduced to the world as the first 3D printed IKEA hack. I was like, I like what you do, but you shouldn't be doing furniture out of furniture. We should do something else. And let's put some technology in it. Let's put some 3D printing parts. And this is when, over a single day, we designed this Frusta tool, this Frusta bicycle. And with the extra parts, these are actually just two Frusta tools with the exact same parts you found in the box, but just assembled the wrong way. This is what happens when you can assemble IKEA furniture the wrong way. And with the same parts, we designed this little sled because we had extra time on our hands. Of course, there's so many other ways to use 3D printing. Some of the most interesting ones are when you use 3D printing directly on the human body. And this is often done with the help of 3D scanning. With 3D scanning combined to 3D printing, you can quickly do custom orthopedic insoles, or even custom hearing aids can be produced at a better price. It also has a huge potential, 3D scanning, in fashion and haute couture. You'll have one of the world master on the subject talking a little bit later. But this is a project I did for Valentine's Day 1 year with my wife. And of course, well, the present was for me. Perhaps the most impressive way to use 3D printing is when it changes the body itself. You might have heard of this college student in the United States who 3D scanned his own teeth and made a series of clear orthodontic aligners for himself to straighten his teeth. So this kid, when you think of it, he designed his own smile for only $60. But such custom equipment can cost thousands of dollars. There's also one of my favorite initiatives in the world, which is Enable. Enable is a company that started by 3D printing free prosthetic hands for kids born without their fingers. And the project quickly got adapted for war amputees in South Sudan, or even for people who weren't careful enough using tools and lost a finger. was done by a friend recently, who I learned will be speaking at Industry D Industry. I don't know how to pronounce it, but Industry with a tree. Paul Sohi, and he worked in the last year on a very amazing project. He designed a special orthopedic leg for a German Paralympic cyclist, and she will be using this exact leg for the Rio 2016 Games. And I'm sure she'll kick everyone's butt. I could keep talking for hours about how we can use 3D printing for complex medical applications, reconstructive surgeries, production of artificial organs. I could also talk about how we can manage to 3D print complete houses and even, well, functional cars. But what I wanted to show you with these examples is that today, 3D printing goes way beyond industrial design. It has the potential to revolutionize architecture, archaeology, medicine, even cooking. So I'm asking you, if you had the possibility to build anything you want, anywhere, and when I say anywhere, it could be the moon, could be underwater, could be in the savannah or in the Amazon, what would you make? Thank you.
Well, has been like the very amazing first part of our Made Again conference. I would like to invite you to actually, sorry. Actually, this is the moment to have a small bio break. So we're going to stop for 10 minutes. You can go smoke a cigarette. You can go to the toilet. You can go take some water. We're going to start back again with Priska, with Francis, with Johnny, that I'm sure that you don't want to miss. So 10 minutes and we start again. Okay? Thank you.
I died for beauty, but was scarce adjusted in the tomb, when one who died for truth was in an adjoining room. He questioned softly why I failed. For beauty, I replied, and I for truth, themselves are one. We brethren are, he said. And so, as kinsmen met a night, we talked between the rooms, until the moth had reached our lips, and called our name. And I for truth, themselves are one. We brethren, softly, why I fail. For beauty, I replied, and I for truth, themselves are one. We brethren are, he said. And so, as kinsmen met tonight, we talked between the rooms, until the moth had reached our lips, and covered our name.
Hello, hello. Our 10 minutes are up, so please come back to your seats. We're gonna keep on going with the talks. Should I call him on the mic? Yo. Please take a seat. We're gonna start again.
Hello. No, no, it's you, right?
I will.
Can I introduce it? You are introducing. Yeah, but can I do it now? Or? Ready? Okay.
You try to make things easier and you make everything worse.
Hello. Welcome back, everyone. You ready? We have 4 amazing speakers lined up. And the first one is Priska Wispel. She's amazing. She's half French, half Danish, best half of both. She started as a fashion designer, right? Got super curious, did things a little bit different, experimented with a lot of things, still experiments every day. And I would like to give it to her now to tell you more about parsimony.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me at this event. I'm super excited about what's going to happen in the next few days. So my name is Priska Wilsbaum. I'm, as Guillaume said, a fashion designer. I started with my company, Vilspil de Arte, in 2002, directly out of school, together with a partner. And our work was very much around testing processes, textures, looking into a lot about fabric manipulation, seeing how different manipulations of fabric can become something structural. We also did a lot of performance art and worked with choreographers, very much in this, the process of creation, what changes the way that we design things. So in this process, we've done a lot of prototyping in paper, used simple shapes, geometric shapes, to create full collections, for example, out of the strip of paper, or out of a diamond shape, or out of, and just prototyping these shapes over and over and over again until we found enough form out of it to create a collection. In the fabric end of it, we used a lot of both quilting and forming of leather, some of these more architectural practices of gluing different layers together to create structurally sound, so we could build upwards, whereas normally fabric tends to drape. We played a lot around with the anatomy, with the way that things move when you manipulate the fabric, something, or leather, which is something extremely stiff. Doing something like this with a very, very simple manipulation of just cutting straight lines into it, and by attaching it different parts of the body, enhancing movement. No, that didn't work. There. So that was my time as a fashion designer. I closed the company in 2012. And from then on, I dedicated myself 100% to more the research side of things, the technology behind how we produce clothing and what materials can do, the manufacturing processes and materials. So this is a very personal travel through what I've discovered and what I've been interested in. I arrived at Pier 9 in San Francisco, which is the mecca of all maker spaces when it comes to additive manufacturing and also subtractive manufacturing. And for me, I had been extremely fascinated by the idea of 3D printing and the possibilities of 3D printing, but when I arrived there, I realized also how far away from my field of textiles it was. And so my mission became a bit about how do I translate this idea of subtractive and additive manufacturing to textile. Laser cutting was the first area that I went into. It's something that I knew already a bit about, and I actually just moved very quickly through this whole prototyping process. The goal being trying to keep this, keep to one, the same way that I'd done with the collections before, keeping to one technique or one shape or one material, and then pushing the limits of what that technique could do. So the whole idea being, how much of a piece of clothing can I make with only laser cutting? Using my pattern making skills, which is something that I had used over 12 years, so I knew a lot about that. And here you can see one of the final results when it's just coming out of the laser cutter. And then I'm testing to see if it fits onto this half-sized mannequin. Like that. So all the fit is incorporated in these cuts in advance, which means that there's only one seam that needs to be made at the back. The same idea I took over to another technique that was used a lot in fashion, which is a burnout print, where it weakens the fabric because it takes out some of the fibers, but not all of it. And so I designed this one piece as a test where this flat shape becomes a top just from weakening the fabric at certain areas. So I decide where the pleats are going to be because the fabric folds naturally where it's been weakened. And the sleeves fall as well because the fabric has been weakened there. Otherwise, it would stick out and make folds the same way. When you're as crazy about processes as I am, and manufacturing processes and what it does to aesthetics, the natural continuation of that is in biology, chemistry, and biofabrication. This is a field that is very new, and it's not, there isn't that much being done as products yet. But luckily, I got to play around a lot with it at Pier 9 because they had a bio nano lab there. And so I played around with mycelium, this testing the different ways that it could interact with fabric, looking for interesting ways of fusing the fabric, looking for how to control growing this mushroom substance, this living substance, how to control it on the fabric, how to decide how much control can I have over something that normally we wouldn't have control over. And this is often the dilemma in working with living things. It's finding out how much control can we have and also how much control do we want to have. This is also some of the mycelium fabric. So this is the mushroom on the left side, grown on a substrate of wood, and then it took it through a process to get it as soft as possible so I get a textile fabric out of it. In the bacteria world, there is also fermentation processes that are done by bacteria that can actually become fabric. And it's a strange process because you can mold this material. It grows over a few weeks. You can mold it. You can, once it's dry, you take it out, you dry it, and then you can laser cut it. You can dye it. And the thing that was interesting for me was you can actually insert something into this layer while it's growing, and it will continue to grow around it, which is a bit difficult to see here, but there's a piece of wood inside the last one there. The idea of manipulation, growing something and inserting a piece of wood into it, you could actually create structures that would naturally fall in a certain way. You can program them to a certain direction. Since then, I'm back in Copenhagen and I'm working on creating a textile fab lab to explore further these things and to engage more people and the experts that are needed in these fields. And what I just wanted to talk about now was my fascination for these processes and what it does for the design and for the aesthetics and for where we're going as a society. I personally had a hard time with the notion of sustainability. At the beginning, I've always felt like it was something that was natural for me. It made sense. And at the same time, there was this idea of the good and the bad and all of these rules and a lot of information that was really difficult to get a hold of. And so it felt like constraints. But through this love of process, and this love of the processes that are in nature, actually, if you look at plants and if you look at animal cells, all of these things in nature, you find a lot of things that are very relevant for sustainability. One of them is parsimony, which is a word I learned not long ago, but I've taken very much to heart, because it is the scientific principle that things are usually connected or behave in the simplest and most economical way. Everything in nature, it has a mission to reproduce most of the time, and then it goes into these systems that are designed to use the least resources possible. This is obviously a sustainable way to work. Transparency, the fact that the process itself is so beautiful, it's mathematical. We talk about the proportions in nature. We talk about the whole process of how a plant becomes a plant, how the way it looks, is the process itself is beautiful, and therefore the idea of the cooking picture is because if you can open up your kitchen and show what you're doing, then your product is probably a good product. And there's an idea of if we can design the process to be as beautiful as possible, then the product could be as beautiful as possible. The other thing in nature, which I find extremely fascinating, is that aesthetics and function are not things that collide as they do sometimes in design when we're trying to plan things out and we're trying to, we often have a conflict of interest between what is functional and what is aesthetic. Whereas in nature, these two things are created simultaneously and they're impossible to break apart. Combined functions is another thing. In a leaf, the plumbing is the same system as the structural system. And circularity, because it comes, everything in nature is used again. It's broken up into, it's made of very, very simple parts. There's very simple chemical substances that form everything in nature. And therefore they can be broken apart again, and they can be recreated into something new. So everything that is used in one situation, disposed of, it is taken up again by another organism that uses the same thing. So this is I could talk about a lot more. I have a lot more slides, but I think that this is where I would like to stop, because the circularity is what we're about today with this Made Again challenge, the idea of reusing and rethinking in which direction. Right now we need to reuse what we've done. But in the future, we can also rethink how we're making things so that it actually becomes natural, that we don't have to do it on purpose every time. It actually becomes, all of our materials end up being the right materials, and they naturally become a part of each other. Thank you very much.
Hello? Yeah. Thank you, Prisca. The next person I would like to invite on stage is Francis Bitonti. He is a designer. He's the president and founding director of Bitonti Studio. He's also a researcher in additive manufacturing, kind of a wizard of 3D printing, pushing the limits of it towards data-driven design methodologies, geometric algorithms, all these complicated things that in the end gives amazing results. I'll leave it to him to explain.
Of course. Sorry. Had to use my own laptop. Yeah, cool. Okay, great. My name is Francis Bitonti, founder of Studio Bitonti. We just changed the name yesterday, so I'm still getting used to that. Oh, sorry about that. Too loud now? Yeah, all good. Okay. So the way I like to talk about what we do is we're a design studio, a consultancy. We work mostly on innovation projects. We are creating design and material innovation for the information age. And I really like to make that distinction because I don't consider what we do industrial design. I think the industrial age is over. We like to think about materials and products as information constructs. And I'm going to talk more about that as we go through this. And I think the biggest thing to realize with that is how the studio is structured and who works on projects in the office when they get assigned to us. Nobody has the title of designer. I think it's a word that might be starting to lose some meaning. It's overused. It means too many things. So people are disappointed when they don't get to be called designers after design school. But this is the kind of language we use around the people that work on our teams. So design is designing things that are functional, beautiful, made to be used and manufactured. And algorithmic design, we spend a lot of time building algorithms to build products, to build materials, to create material performances. And this notion of a futurist is somebody who's socially minded, someone who's aware of not necessarily just thinking from who we are right now or who the human being is or designing for a single human condition, but looking at our kind of surrounding technological landscape and thinking about where we're going and how do we design for that person? What are the new potentials that we're going to be enabled to do? Who are we going to be is really the question. And that's what I like to have the designers thinking about, and that's the root of the projects as we start to work. So I want to start off by talking about form, and this is the thing that really drew me towards 3D printing to begin with. I actually started years ago before I was an architect, before I worked in engineering. I've had many lives. I was working in CGI. And what I realized was that I could create really complex forms in the computer. I could create things that looked like all kinds of stuff in nature, trees, fire, ice, but we couldn't fabricate much of it. And during my time as a grad student, I spent some time studying with this mathematician called Stephen Wolfram, who worked with systems like this to model all kinds of things in nature. These are just simple zeros and ones. They're binary algorithms. And the first part of my career was all about, like, could we use those algorithms, those binary systems, to create geometric structures? I was calling myself an architect at that time, and I made proposals like that, and my architecture career wasn't really going that well, as you could imagine. I was trying. So eventually we started thinking, well, there are tools that could help us fabricate these things, but they're working at a smaller scale. And I realized that the big thing that was missing, which has already been talked about today, is that tooling is gone, right? So there's no more physical molding. Tooling is actually now a software construct. So when I was making these things, it wasn't that I wanted to make a table that looked like whale teeth or a chair that looked like it was a bush. It was really a negotiation with efficiency. And what I was finding was that the tools were incentivizing me to create geometries that were very high surface area and low volume. Whereas when I was designing for machining and traditional processes, we were making geometries that were very high volume and low surface area. And that's because the nature of the materials were different, right? The energy was going into removing away stock material. Here, the energy is going into building things up. So I was being motivated to produce a different class of geometries, and a different aesthetic was coming up out of that. Our first project was for the Department of Transportation. This was, believe it or not, a bike rack. Nobody thought they were bike racks. I had to pay a guy $5 so I could get a picture to put his bike in it. It was 3D printed, and it was in 2007, and we made a $50,000 bike rack for the city of New York. So they loved us. But like I said, and as also was brought up earlier, this is now desktop technology, right? We could make this for a few $100s now. So the technology's come a long way, and it is becoming more approachable. It's becoming more affordable. We're able to get time on these machines to do research and find things that we couldn't before. Just going to go through this briefly. So the majority of our time now is really spent focused on materials, on material innovation, and we're not making polymers, we're not making new alloys, but what we're really working with is what's out there now, and can we use these various processes to create new material performances that we couldn't before. So we're very much on the point in which the material is interacting with the machine and how the machine's interacting with software. This is a reaction diffusion algorithm, and these are two axes we're plotting out. This is everything that algorithm's capable of making. And generally what we'll do is we'll start with something like this. We'll design an algorithm that's able to produce certain geometric effects or a range of geometric effects, and then we figure out what they can do. Oh boy, this is a new deck, and I don't know how long it is. We'll get there. So we can match this up against engineering data, right? And we can find behaviors or trends in there that we want and use that to control certain things. We can look at customer data, right? So this is where being able to procedurally generate forms starts to become an important pivot point for how we feed into these various data sets, which which brands have access to that we didn't have before. Boy, I really sucked up time. All right, I got 10 minutes? Oh, okay. All right, we're good. I was getting a 5-minute. So this is an MRI, and I'm showing you this because this is really how 3D printers kind of work, right? This is what we're getting. We're stacking up a bunch of images. It's basically a big animation playing out. And this is how, I think about multi-materiality, right? Because each one of those pixels could represent a deposition of a polymer. And that polymer could be deposited under different conditions, different temperatures. It could be deposit different speeds, different feed rates. There's a whole range of parameters these machines can do, which can help us vary the mechanical properties, can help us vary the optical properties. We can have functionally graded materials now, which is something that we weren't really able to do before. The first time we ever approached these technologies, we were doing a lot of work in the fashion industry. We were working on a handbag. It seemed like a multi-material problem. We got this far. We made a hinge. If anyone's used these machines, it didn't work, right? We can close the hinge once and it would fall apart. So what we did was this. Oh, so you're going to just see some static on the screen. If it plays, okay. So that static is cross sections through the material. So what we're doing is we're blending probabilistically from one material to the other. So we can have a very, very thin 16 micron layer of ABS and then gradually blend into their version of like a rubber. That was able to let us reinforce the material, and we were able to create a functional hinge. Well, that got us thinking, well, could we produce something that's both optically clear and optically opaque, something that's mechanically soft and squishy, but also rigid? And what you'll see as this plays out is you're going to see a lot of different tones of color, just like you saw in the static. You're going to see some pinks and white, like everything from white to red in the spectrum. And really what you're seeing, if you zoom in here, each pixel represents one 16 micron droplet of a photopolymer. The reason you're getting different colors is because we're getting different distributions or different microstructures of each of those, which is helping us functionally grade the materials, whether it be for optical purposes or mechanical purposes. This is an isolated research project, but we've been building on this slowly over the years. These are some of the results from that simulation. You can see we're blending in and out of things that are clear. It's very obvious here. You can see the clear and the white. And it wasn't assembled. It came right out of the printer like that. And there is no hard line between materials. Everything is smoothly blending from one state to the other. We did some experiments with articulated skins. We've also used the same technique to get color gradients in prints, so the color actually goes all the way through. This is a company we've been working with for the past 2 years, sort of quietly. They're called Feeds. They're trying to go to market with about a $100 walking shoe. One of the things you'll notice unusual here is that the tool head's moving in 3 dimensions. The other thing that's happening is we're able to make very small fluctuations in the tool head, which is creating that woven pattern. So all throughout the cross section of that shoe are little air pockets, which could let it stretch more or stretch less. So this is letting us vary the mechanical properties of the shoe. These are some earlier tests. And what we're able to do now is we built some software up for them from the ground up where we can bake in properties that we want based on either analysis or customer preference or sizing data, and we can generate the shoe for them on the server, all the tool paths and everything. We skip 3D geometry altogether and go directly to the machine code. This is the product as it stands right now. They just went to market. They sold their first 100 pairs. The men's shoes are coming out later this year. They're venture backed. They're funded by DSW also. They're supposed to be available in the DSW stores in the US in late August. So keep an eye out for that. Using the same technique, we've also collaborated with Intel and Chromat, the fashion brand, like a high-end fashion brand in New York. This was a carbon fiber dress that expands and contracts. The entire dress is 3D printed on actually MakerBots using the same technique you just saw. But if you'll notice, you're looking closely, it looks like it's woven. That's because we're moving the tool head back and forth, kind of like a loom. So we're able to control where the striations are and the lines are and get very fine openings. Am I okay on time still? All right, we'll do materials today. Sorry, it's a lecture. This is the project we're probably most well known for. It was a 3D printed gown for a burlesque star. Her name's Dita Von Teese. The dress has 3,000 articulated connections. Each one is unique. And that was what made this project special. There's been other 3D printed dresses. There have been other 3D printed dresses that have been chainmail. None of them have had 3,000 unique mechanical parts. The concept for the dress was that they would wrap these Fibonacci spirals up around her body to create a mesh or a textile-like structure. The resulting mesh is something like this, and what we would do is we would map these components onto that mesh using the geometry as a guide, creating a fully assembled textile, which we would then print and assemble. It came out of the machine like this. Once it was cleaned off, it's fully articulated, flexible. It's a very, very light dress. It's not heavy like armor. It only weighs, I think, 10 pounds with the corset sewn in. We hollowed all them out. The wall thicknesses are about 0.5 millimeter. It was 12 parts. And when it's all assembled, it does behave very much like a fabric or a gown. She wore it for an event at the Ace Hotel in New York. I think it was Fashion Week, like fall, winter 2013, I think, or maybe 2012 now. Some detail of the shoulder. The shoulders were actually rigid. We did most of the design work in about 2 weeks, so we were nervous about 3D structures on the shoulder. I'm going to wrap it up here because I think I'm over time. I got 3 minutes. All right, let's see how far we can get through consumers. So this part of the lecture, I just want to talk about how our relationship with consumption is changing. We talked a lot about algorithms. We talked about procedural design. What we're talking about is various kinds of interfaces to software that are making products, that are making also unique material properties and configurations. I'm going to show you 2 videos, and the first one, well, each one of these videos, sorry, 3 videos. Each one of these videos is going to give you a different visual result. This is a simulation running off of a body scan. We changed 1 parameter each time, and each time we get 3 different reactions to that body scan. This one, you see them settling into big spirals around the back, moving very quickly out of areas of high curvature. In the next one, you'll see the opposite. Areas of high curvature, they'll leave the body and make a loop. You'll see it eventually self-organize into something that looks like a skirt around her waist. A completely different reaction, but it's the same code, right? So if you think about how you might empower a user or a customer to interact with the product, interact with patterns, you're building different relationships with your customers. You can extend the narrative of a product. This is a more concrete example of somewhere we've applied that. Last year we did these shoes for United Nude, which is a Amsterdam-based shoe brand. We did a limited edition, but every piece in the edition was unique. So every time we sold a pair of these heels, they were generated on the cloud, and because I'm conscious of time, I'm going to show you the range of behaviors. So this is an example of what that's able to produce. So just as we were generating those abstract paths, we were then able to use those paths to make networks of tunnels through those heels. So every time we sold one, everybody got something unique. One of the problems we noticed, though, is that nobody wanted the simple ones. So they all wanted the stuff on the far end of the spectrum. But anyway, live and learn. This is a video of blending through those various states. We had to overlay this as a little bit of, it's not real time. This is a very, very slow system to run. But thinking back to that earlier diagram I had of that reaction diffusion, and you could imagine if you had structural criteria and maybe you had somebody choosing a kind of aesthetic preference on the other axis, right? You can start to create this system that's able to interact with the larger ecosystem of a brand. We've done this for jewelry. You can see here kind of range of behaviors. Why is this in here? sorry, it's a new presentation. So this is 3 years ago, we did a collaboration with 3D Hubs. I think probably a lot of you are familiar with 3D Hubs. I've seen it on some of the slides. At the time when we did this collaboration, they only had 5,000 people in their network. These are 500 of the hubs that we thought had the quality was good enough to produce our products. And we wanted to really, in a very tangible way, explore the idea of a distributed factory. Could it actually work? What would the problems be? How would you do it? We designed a collection of tabletop housewares that could each have some degree of customization, but more importantly, were all designed to be printed on desktop printers that didn't need any supports, no post-processing. You could basically print this, take it off the printer, and go. And that was important for controlling quality. You would enter in your name and your zip code. We would use your zip code and the 3D Hubs API to match you up with a local producer. And then your hub would produce the part and go and pick up the piece when it was ready. So we put ourselves in the position where we were just selling the files to the hubs, and we let the hub do all the customer transactions and interactions. All right, that concludes my talk.
Johnny, are you ready? I'd like to welcome Johnny Steiner on stage. He is a designer, art director, co-founder of an amazing company called OpenDesk, a company that makes furniture in a very, very different way, a company that has built its whole business model on this idea of distributed production networks, on open source design, on other little goodies that he's going to tell us about in a talk that is called Open Making.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm Johnny Steiner. I'm an architect and designer based in London. It's great to be invited today to share a little bit about a project I've been working on over the last 2 years with a team, really looking into distributed manufacturing and how this could lead to a more circular means of production. And so this experiment has led to something called OpenDesk, which is really we're sort of saying is a new kind of furniture company. It's a furniture company that believes in local production and distributed manufacturing. And it's also a furniture company that believes in an open business model, which is about acting in the benefits of the designer, in the benefits of the maker, fabricator, and also the customer. So it's really about kind of acting in the benefits of all parties, and through a kind of transparent business model, which I'll hopefully try and sort of illustrate. And also, I think it's worth sort of talking about what we're doing, how we're doing it, but also why we started this. And so basically, OpenDesk is essentially a web-based furniture company. It's a platform. It has a library of designs that you can browse online, and it has a network of makers, a bit like the 3D Hubs model. You can put in your postcode, and you can find a maker that's local to you. And why did we start this? Well, as I said, I'm an architect. I've worked on a lot of projects that took a long time. The last building I worked on took about 4 years. I got very excited about the idea that I could get involved in fabrication much more closely, that I have a much more direct link to the means of production, that I could work on things that I could prototype within 4 days, same day rather than 4 months or something. So we looked at lots of different means of production. I think we're all familiar with a lot of these, and we actually settled on something that's very, very simple, and it's very universal, and that's deliberately why we chose it. It's something that's we think the most mature and available means of digital fabrication, which is CNC milling. And why are we interested in this? Well, I have a design studio called 00, which is a group of architects who really want to think about the social impact of what we design. And that's So it's a platform for thinking about ideas and then trying to turn them into projects. With this project, it started out with rethinking, if you like, the 20th century model of manufacturing, which is all about designing things where, in sort of knowledge centers, protecting that with very strict IP controls, then manufacturing things where land and labor is cheapest, mass production, and then mass logistics to get that back, often to the same markets in which they've been designed. And we see that actually this is something that's already really shifting. So as we know, digital fabrication is something that's available now to the many. There are digital tools, free even tools online. And so when we sort of add together the tools and the means of production, that means we can start to really think about manufacturing being anywhere. That the sort of factory of the future is wherever we want it to be. And why do we get excited about that? Because we think that's something that starts to talk about supply chains that are a lot more local, a lot more social, and a lot more human, sort of people-centric. So we're very used to this kind of approach to distribution. What we're actually interested in is something like this, which is hard to see because it's actually about something like this. So this is London, and these are some of the makers in our network, and these are some of the journeys of products that can actually today happen from this kind of distributed model. And so really OpenDesk started with us as a design studio asking a question: is distributed manufacturing, is local making something that's only for Fab Labs and the maker movement, or is it something that is something that we could embrace on a bigger scale? Is it something that's scalable? Is there actually a business model that we can build around that? And so we realized that there are digital designs that all designers nowadays design digitally native, pretty much. There's an independent maker network. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of workshops with the capabilities, the skills, the latent capacity to make in this way. And then there are a lot of people out there in the world who care about how their products are made. If we could build something which brings all this together in a kind of easy to digest and understand way, would that work? So that was a question we set ourselves, and it really was an experiment to start with. And also, we were very excited about the idea that the long tail of making, the maker movement end of things, as technology becomes more adopted, the cost of that technology decreases, the access to it increases. And so actually, you can make an OpenDesk product in your garage. We really love the idea that it's kind of democratizing access to production. And I'll show a few examples of some of the makers in our network, some of the people we're working with in a minute. And so just to sort of tell a bit of a story about how this happened, as I said, I'm an architect. This was basically, OpenDesk is a bit of an accident, really. We worked with a software company in London who wanted a very affordable, very fast fit out of their office. And they presented us with a challenge: can we do it within a very tight budget and time frame, but also could we do it in such a way that they could share their design of the product, because they also had an office in New York and they wanted the same desk. So we realized that if we design things in a digital way, we could ship the digital file, not the hardware. So it's this idea that hardware becomes software for a software company. This is just to kind of illustrate how this very first desk worked, and really it also starts to bring into our thinking a lot of other aspects like materiality, like efficiency, sort of circular materials, things that we're now starting to engage a lot more with, even from the sort of first product that we worked with. So this desk really kicked it all off as a bit of an accident. We then had a lot of people asking us for this desk, and we built a little website so that people could start to download the files for it. We then started to design a few other products, and at the same time, I'm going to go through this a bit quicker, invited other designers to send us their designs. So this is a guy called Dennis in Sao Paulo, who's also an architect, who designed a chair. He prototyped it himself. He sent it over to us, and this was the first example of someone joining into the network not as a maker but as a designer. So what this has sort of led to now is a kind of whole library of online products that are downloadable and locally can be made locally in Fab Labs in workshops. So when we're thinking about local production, how do we find these makers? Who are these makers? So I thought I'd introduce a few of the people we work with just to show you the kind of breadth of that and the scale. And so what we did initially was we built a separate website, which is a directory of digital fabricators called FabHub. It's a free site to sign up to. We've since built a network of over 600 workshops in 64 countries through that site, and they're all pretty much people that we can now call on, a bit like the Airbnb model of actually using kind of other people's capacity, other people's space, rather than actually us building. We don't own any of these spaces. It's all about returning value to these makers. So there's over 600 of them. From a guy on the edge of the M25 in London who taught us pretty much everything we knew. When we started, we didn't know really anything about CNC fabrication, to a chap called Enrique in Mexico City who has a very professional workshop. He's been making furniture for many years. To a group of makers in Devon in southern England who actually make church organs. So they're really very, very high craft level. In our network, these are probably the highest level of craft. And as you can imagine, there's not that much demand for church organs all the time. It takes about 2 years to make one church organ. So these guys were suffering a bit. Their business wasn't doing so well. They found out about us. I think it was an article in The Guardian. They got in contact and they said, could we make OpenDesk? We have a CNC machine. We have the staff who are skilled. We actually don't have much work on right now. We need some work. Could we make OpenDesk? So this was really exciting for us, that through distributed manufacturing, through digital fabrication, we could actually start to provide work and support these kind of independent small fabricators, suppliers. On the very small end of it, this is a guy called Ollie who's got a membership to a tech shop, a bit like a commercial fab lab in Pittsburgh. He doesn't own a machine. He just pays for the time on the machine, so he can make maybe 1 or 2 desks, one of the very small end of the scale, but he's still able to kind of be part of the network. And then on the sort of other end of the scale, this is a project that I'm really kind of excited about, which is a collaboration with a city council in the UK, in Bristol, who had an enterprise centre that they needed furniture for. They contacted us and they said, could we get your furniture made? And when we spoke to them, we realized this building was all about creating jobs, creating skills in this area where there's a lot of unemployment. So we said to them, why don't we help you set up a workshop, not only so that you can make the furniture for your own space, but you can travel, provide jobs, and then you can become a maker in our network. So they're now able to make OpenDesk for other people. So these kind of stories, I think, kind of illustrate why we wanted to do this. And so the kind of things that these guys are making, all the way from a very small, kind of humble stool, there's one kicking around here somewhere, through to kind of full-scale office fit-outs, quite big jobs. This is the Greenpeace offices in London. And I'm going to show just a few quick journeys of some of the products that we've made and where the makers are. So for Greenpeace, they're very excited about being able to know where the materials come from. Obviously, very important to them, the kind of chain of custody. They want to know it's FSC standard timber. They want to actually meet the guys making the products. And in this case, they wanted to also be able to change the design slightly. And so this is about a 10-minute cycle ride from their office in central London to Hackney Central. Of course, they're going to cycle there because they're Greenpeace. And then, oh, that's not supposed to be there. Then there's, we went to the Salone in Milan for the furniture fair. Again, we exhibited some things. We obviously wanted to make these in Milan. We didn't want to ship them there, so we found some fantastic makers through our own site who are very close by, and we were able to make them sort of less than 5 kilometers away from the center of Milan. And then the last one in the story, the little stool. These chaps in Brooklyn, Associated Fabrication, color-coded with their CNC machine. think this is a typical CNC look, by the beard. And yeah, so I was able to get this made within kind of 20 minutes of where I was giving a presentation, right in downtown Brooklyn, opposite Manhattan. So just to illustrate that this network is really operating and it functions really in these kind of very urban centers, which also excites us that that's possible. Of course, digital design enables other things. It enables distribution, distributed manufacturing, but it enables us to version things. So a bit like GitHub code, we can have a kind of a route that we can then version into many variants, and we've seen this ourselves, and then we also see this through other designers taking products and versioning them. And this is where the kind of licensing and the sort of openness is really essential. So for just to sort of play that out from Dennis's chair that he designed in Sao Paulo, because he's made his design under Creative Commons, it's possible to version it in, this is a very simple, basic example, but a French designer in Paris is able to take that design and do a version of it. Obviously, this throws up questions as well as answers. So how do you reward both designers if somebody wants the co-designed product? Who takes liability for that design? There's a lot of questions that this asks, but we're kind of excited that it's asking these questions, and we are open to suggestions to how we answer them. We don't, as it's an experiment, we don't have answers to all these things. In Dennis's case, you can see that he chose to license his design as a Creative Commons attribution. So our business model works in the way that any designer, if something's made for, if you want to make something for yourself and the designer says that's cool, and chooses a license that allows that, then that's totally cool. And that happens a lot in Fab Labs. That's actually the way that we've, I think, reached a lot of people, and a lot of people have found out about this kind of way of making things. But if it's made commercially, if someone's paying a maker to make something to our network, we ask that maker to factor in a design fee that's chosen by the designer. So we don't unlike other companies might, we let the designer choose, and it's also an experiment. If they make their fee very high and their product becomes very expensive, less people are going to want that product. So I think it's all about things being open and transparent and letting people play with the variables. And then with digital design, you can personalize things. You can integrate other design communities. We're very excited about the idea of open source electronics getting integrated into furniture. Because things are made on demand post-purchase, we can actually, we've worked with Arduino, we can actually add a lot of things in, and that's something we're exploring. This is the idea of modularity. So it's the idea that furniture is not a fixed thing. It can be something you can upgrade, you can adapt over time. Some experiments with Arduino, with others, about embedding technology. In this case, somebody wrote an app for the desk, which there's an LED based under the surface of the plywood, and they wrote an app which linked up to the bus checker app. So because Transport for London data is open in London, you can actually, for example, in this case, you can set the LED so that when it knows where you are, it knows the bus that you want to get, and it knows what time it is. So it can change color so that when it's, for example, green, if you leave the office and walk at a normal pace, by the time you get to your bus stop, the bus will be there. That's the kind of app you could write. So that's actually, someone wrote that. You could obviously, other people wanted it to be their inbox filling up. We didn't think that was so cool, but you can imagine how this could be, if you open this up to other design communities, what they can do with it. We don't want to dictate that. We want to just open it up. And then the other side of making things more circular is the materiality. So we're aware that plywood is, it has its limitations. How efficiently can we use plywood? We do know where our plywood comes from. We can ask for it to be certified. But actually, we're really excited about materials that are much more locally available and specific. So in this case, two materials I think we're going to be playing with a little bit this week. On the left, Smile Plastics. It's been around for a little while. It's actually 100% recycled post-consumer waste plastic. It comes in sheets similar to standard plywood sheets, and it can be milled and it can be kind of used in a similar way. On the right is a new product that we're we've started to work with a company called Solid Wool, who use waste wool and bioresin to create similar kind of sheet materials. So we really like the idea, excited about the idea that this model can also help support small-scale industry in other sectors. So material research, making new materials, supporting small-scale fabrication. And then the other part of our circular kind of journey is something that we've only just started working on, and we've had the help of 2 researchers from the Royal College of Art who came to OpenDesk and sort of said, can we look at how you do things and how we can make them more circular? And they came up with 3 ideas. One was a second-hand market for OpenDesk products, and that's something we are going to start building onto our site. Another was a kind of aftercare element. So if you break the leg of a table, you don't have to throw it away. You can easily request somebody comes and cuts just that part and replaces it. And then the third part, which we've actually started to implement already, is what we're calling the provenance platform, which is about the idea of every piece of furniture has a history. When it's downloaded, it has a code. It's a bit like an ISBN number. If you think about a barcode, no one really cares about a barcode on a product, but on an ISBN number actually tells you something useful. If you type it into a computer, you can find out if that book's in stock, who wrote it, whatever. Our code basically takes you to a page on the website which tells you who designed the product, where they were when they designed it. There's some stuff about the design. Then it shows you the code, and it shows you who made it. This is a bit too fast. And then it shows you who downloaded it, and then the idea is that it lives with this product. So the table in this case never loses its identity. No one will ever ask who made that table because they'll always be able to know who made it. We think this is important for this sort of circular aspect because there's a value, I think, when a product has a history, it has a new kind of value. I think this table was designed in London, made in San Francisco. It's been used by Arduino. It's currently being used by Autodesk for 2 trade shows. And instead of being thrown away, it's got a new home in Pinterest. So by the time it goes to Pinterest next week, it's already got a history. When somebody goes to have a meeting in Pinterest, they'll be able to see this code. They'll be able to look it up and see who made it and what's happened around this table. We're kind of excited about that, and we're going to try and roll that out onto lots of products, pretty much everything that we have in our library. And so, yeah, I think that sort of sums it up. There's some very complicated things behind the scenes at OpenDesk about how we make this happen. We've got to manage a lot of data. We've got to manage a lot of digital files. We've got to provide production-ready cutting files to makers all over the world in different material thicknesses because everything's slightly different. We have to provide a way for customers on the website to configure products and choose things. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in what is actually still a very simple process. It's a very simple single process, single material approach. We've done that by building some tools ourselves, which includes kind of parametric modeling of all the products so that we can easily resize things. Someone asks for a different size desk, we can change it. It saves us a lot of time. It makes it a lot more efficient. It's quite easy. Obviously, you have to set constraints with materials and things. So we then issue out files that are exact to someone's need. And then just to end, I think we're basically excited by a future where products are, there's a different relationship with the things that we consume. As James said, do we consume them? I mean, basically, can we have products that we configure for ourselves, and then they start to have a kind of history from the moment they're born, and then they acquire value over time. In this case, we've been working on the idea that in browser you can actually start to configure something. So maybe a product never, it only exists once it's been configured and made. Like there's only ever one version, and that's yours. And so I think all these things through technology are possible. But to be honest, for us, the most important thing is how we distribute the value that we're creating to the designer, to the maker locally, and we deliver value to customers through actually giving products that are more appealing because of the narrative behind them. So yeah, that's how far we've got with OpenDesk.
Okay, you're still okay? There's one more. Um, I'm afraid that if I say again that I like him, we might start rumors. But what the hell? Whatever happens in Barcelona stays in Barcelona, right? This guy probably doesn't need introduction, but he's going to talk to us about something very, very important. This idea of a fab city, this idea that you've been working hard on materializing for us to play with now, and I leave it up to you.
Thank you, Guillaume. I think that the first thing I have to say is I'm sorry about all the noise in the background, but it's impossible to shut down people here. They want to keep working. It's probably one of the very unique places in which we actually have to kick people out every day. They really are. We actually say that we are like a really safe place for weird people. And these weird people, it actually happens that they don't want to leave their job to go to their houses. Or I don't know if they have family or something. But yeah, we are in a unique place, which is this lab, this institute. And we are probably in the beginning of understanding what is a fab city. But I want to start with more like taking it to a personal level. And it's not about Guillaume and me. I'm talking about it's talking about my story, a little bit of my story. I'm an urban planner. I was born in Venezuela. We are known about Chavez and the socialism of the 21st century that didn't work and is failing dramatically in the country. We are known about really beautiful nature. We are known about slums, and we win the Miss Universe every year. 10 years ago, I moved to Barcelona, which is known about its architecture and its amazing understanding of what a city is. So for me, it was a dream to come here. I used to study Barcelona. I loved also football, and I was a Barcelona fan before coming here, but that's not important now. But I got into this place. So I was in a meeting sometime in 2006. By the time we were a really small team in this place, and I'm sitting with all the directors, and they basically were taking the decision of setting up a fab lab. And I was an intern, and of course the only person that could do that was the intern. So I get handed a list of machines and a book, and I started to research about this. And I really understood, like, actually, I didn't want to go back and do urban planning anymore. I didn't want to look at the cities from the top down. I didn't want to actually develop plans and designs for making a street to look very nicer, or actually to look on a square and making it with more light. I really was not interested in that. I was interested on understanding how a city is being affected by the culture of production, by production methods. So if you see how the world works today, I think that Guillaume made a really nice introduction into his talk. We have a linear model. So we extract raw materials from one side of the world. We use fossil fuels in cargo ships to send them to centers of production where we pay really low wages. They're turning into products, which sending into cities, and we're turning into trash, right? So this has really high costs that I'm going to talk about later, but it has implications into a city. So this looks like New York, but it's not. It's actually the tooling used in a factory in Shenzhen to make the loudspeakers that you use in your house. This is a JBL tool setting speakers, and it looks like a city. But if you look into cities itself, the standardized massive productions have influenced how we create cities as well. We have created this repetition of the urban fabric, not only horizontally, but also vertically. Based on a linear system, again, we extract, we dispose. My colleagues told about that before. We have some people that, we don't want to call them, but you can call them slaves somewhere else that we don't know. And I think that James covered that very well. They create products, they send them into cities. This is turned into trash. This is going to be increased if we keep with the same model. These are the predictions. If we keep the same exact model of production that we have today. And which is the driver of all of this? It's just profit. It's really keeping the machine going forever. This is the type of citizen that you want to be. Those are questions that you have to ask yourself, and also how they are attached to a mass production system. No question about it. But I really like, because you made an introduction, Guillaume, about the early 20th century. I'm going to talk about the last 70 years, more or less. And Neil did this introduction. The world is going digital, or went digital, from computers between the 40s and the 50s to internet during the last 30 years. We now can see that there are people that even before they are born, they have a digital life. I don't know if you have Facebook friends that they post the echo of their inside their belly, so they have babies that have a Facebook profile before they're born. But if you think about it, we are not only 15 years ago since we have these tools in our hands. These tools, which are in our pockets, have turned us into producers. We produce content. And that's very, very big. We used to watch television that was produced by someone else. Well, I'm not going to make it in 10 minutes. And then we used to tune in into the television when the show was going on. No, I know that probably with Game of Thrones, that's still happening. But now you have YouTube, and you can have access to content on demand whenever you want. But most importantly, you become a producer of content. And I used to say, if you used to go to a wedding in the 1980s, you have 1 or 2 photographers taking pictures around. If you go to a wedding or to whatever event, then you have maybe this event. You have 2 people, probably a few people carrying big cameras, but actually all of you are photographers and publishers. By the way, this is the St. Peter's Square and how it changed in just 8 years. But then out of this, we have created endless possibilities on the digital revolution, right? Especially in computation and communications. But what has happened is like we have managed to create an extractive economy, again, on top of a democratic tool that is, as it is, internet, or that it was supposed to be. No? So we have all these guys extracting most of the value that we create and our interactions and accumulating that value. But most importantly, it's like Airbnb doesn't own any property. Facebook doesn't produce any content. Alibaba doesn't have any stock. And then Uber doesn't own any cars. And this is well spread in social networks. I'm not making that up by myself. So how technology affects into cities? And this is when the smart city concept comes in, promoted by companies in order to sell products, and how they are creating new clients into the city councils. The city councils wanted to create like a big brother kind of city in which you have the mayor in the control room, like a Mr. Able, pressing a button and deciding what is going to happen in the city. Or even the most dreamers that they can think that we are in a moment in which you can create a city from scratch that is going to be successful. So there is a big question about, okay, how we actually think about that, the top-down models, probably they are really, really, really obsolete. And then we need to start to think about bottom-up. This is not new. This is not something I invented by myself. Actually, most of you, or some of you, know the Whole Earth Catalog. This is a publication in the 60s. It actually was the really, really starting of a maker movement and the DIY movement. You can find in the magazine plans to make your own solar cooks. You can learn how to make your own farm in the backyard of your house. But even people before Stuart Brand and friends were having these questions about the connection between bottom-up and top-down processes in the early 20th century. That's Otto Neurath, for instance. So especially we like to think about smart citizens. And actually this is the home of the Smart Citizen project. But I want to think about the Smart Citizen projects from a different point of view. You have people enabled with technology that can create big change. You have people finding the tools that they have to create their own habitats. This is a project in Caracas. This was supposed to be a tower for a bank. It was abandoned the construction, and then people invaded the tower and created a vertical city that actually you can go and get a really nice haircut in the floor 35. So, and to talk about the self-produced cities, and this is a really interesting picture as well because it shows how this infrastructure here is actually a mass transportation system that connects an informal city created by citizens to the formal city. And it used to consider as something that was not part of a city before. So these movements are based on open hardware. If you go to a slum, people share the knowledge of how things are made. If you go and ask them how they did it, they will share it with you. They don't have really data, but they can give you like some facts about how those things are made. And they are open networks as well. This is actually the same principles that we have in Fab Labs. Fabrication laboratories with machines that you can make almost anything. We have more or close to 1,000 Fab Labs today in the world. So wherever you travel, you can go and make almost anything. That's fundamental. It's a network of people, not a network of machines. We share programs like the Fab Academy. It's not only replicating machines, but replicating the people that have the knowledge how to use those machines for the good of everyone. It's about developing research projects as the machine that makes machine project, which is, again, self-replicating Fab Labs, as Neil explained before. But actually, it's also looking into the future of fabrication. This is the Bio Academy, and it's a course that you can learn how to grow almost anything. So in the future, you are not going to make your objects, you're going to grow them. You're going to farm things, and that's starting now. So these networks share projects. Some of them, like this, is a electric bicycle. This is a robot for disaster relief, all open source. A low-cost incubator. A sex toy made by a Swedish designer. A prosthetic hand. That actually people is just openly publishing what they do. They are not scared of putting that value outside of the world. No? And as Johnny said, there are many, many questions about how you can generate a business model that actually fits in the on how we used to see things. And this is really a tension between these two worlds, which are very, very distant at the moment. But we wanted to explore, with all these possibilities in a Fab Lab, to make things that are really transforming people's lives. It's actually, after the existence of Fab Labs for 10 years, how we actually can make a real impact, right? It's not about having cool nerds meeting next to machines and making things that they can only understand. It's not about just things that only geeks can understand, but actually how can reach out into the society. This is how we launched the project Fab City. So with the idea to turn in Fab Labs and their impact from not just at this space, but actually to go out into the city. So I like to think about them in terms of the design process, how you could think about, in the traditional design, you have a designer, you have a product, the product goes to the production line, it goes to distribution, it goes to the store is bought, it goes to the use of the client, and then it goes back into the trash. But what if we can have like a more spiral process in which many people talk about that already before, so I'm not going to repeat it. So it's about, again, creating this end process enabled by technology in which people are not just only consuming content using their computers, but actually they're using their computers to interface with the physical world. It's totally different of how we understand computers today. So if you think about what we have to reconsider, is probably anything. How we live, how we fall in love, how we build our houses, how we decorate our living room, how we die. Can you have an open source coffin? And that was a project from one of our students at RCA with James. It was really cool. It's like, why you cannot make your own coffin? Downloading it from OpenDesk. It's really disruptive in a way you can think. So again, I think that we are trying to, we're like a screwdriver in your brain. You can see the alignment of many people here and what we are talking about and the passion that we have about it. But we are really changing deeply about how we change things, how we make things. And I'm going to put an example that, again, it becomes personal. I used to skateboard. And when I was a teenager, I had to convince my mom that I was a really good kid and I had to get good grades in order for her to buy me a skateboard. But actually, these guys, they run one of the first workshops we had in the Fab Lab. They learned how to make their own skateboard. So they could bypass their moms directly. And that's enabling, totally enabling, imagine. So I learned how to manipulate, and then these guys learn how to make, which is totally different. So some of the projects that we have been done in the Fab Lab goes from, as I told you, the Smart Citizen project. It's an open source sensor platform for people to capture data about the pollution in their cities and share it open source in an open source way. We made a restaurant that you can go, actually it's 2 blocks from here. It's a 0-kilometer restaurant, not only in the food, but actually in the furniture. We didn't use any fossil fuel to transport the furniture from the production to the actually place where we have to install it. And you can download the furniture itself and make it. And you can download the food recipes as well. We are in an amazing architecture school like IAC, so we have made really large-scale projects. I was talking with some of you before about the Fab Lab house. It's a complete self-sufficient house that actually produces more energy than it consumes, but actually it's a house that you can download from the internet. So we have published all the plans and instructions on how to make it. We just got we bought part of a forest, if it makes sense. We had 140 hectares outside the city in which we are building the self-sufficient lab to look in the future of the relationship between nature and technology. We have deployed public Fab Labs inside the city of Barcelona with the city council, thinking about how Fab Labs can be libraries of the future, in which you don't only have access to knowledge or computers with internet that connects you to the world, but actually you have access to the tools to actually turn that information into things. So these are the really low entry point for citizens of Barcelona to get to know what digital fabrication is, and it's part of a complete ecosystem. But there are questions about this, no? So we are still struggling with the city council in seeing, okay, are we really bureaucratizing these places, or we can hack the bureaucracy through these places? And it's a really interesting moment in which we're playing between the old models and new ones. Talking about old models, we actually use the typical public act in which a mayor or a politician commits something to something that they won't actually do. This is the former mayor of Barcelona. He committed to turn Barcelona into a self-sufficient city in the next 40 years. He's not the mayor anymore, and probably he's not going to be alive in the next 40 years. But we have that project in order to actually put tension into the authorities and to drive the people that is really making things around the city. What is funny is that this guy is not the mayor anymore, but then the mayor of Boston say, I want to be part of that Fab City as well. And then the deputy mayor of economy and culture in Amsterdam say, hey, we want to be part of that as well. And then we have a growing network of cities that are committing to transform deeply how they are dependent from external supplies of energy, food, and goods. So this is going to transform culture deeply because we are thinking about a complementary ecosystem for production that goes from your 3D printer at home to your Fab Lab in your neighborhood, to your flexible factory in your city, and probably to some things that we still need to make in China because they don't have any creative process, or somewhere else that you want to decide. But it doesn't make sense to make plastic cups in China and fly them to Barcelona at all. So we need to rescale the global economy, and I think that this is a good start. So this is going to basically disrupt on how economy works. There are many questions about who is going to get the value out of it. When we take out the middlemen, so what's economy about? Because we have created an economy that is totally based on middlemaning. And this is basically going to create a new landscape and a global landscape. And as Neil said, we are not going to ship goods using fossil fuels or materials. They're not going to travel around the world. Only data will travel. Atoms are going to stay in the city. So we are starting in Barcelona, being a spiral production ecosystem. I want to jump ahead from the circular economy. We are starting in the Poblenou, which is going to be our playground for the next week or so. But actually, we are looking forward to start a real-life prototype of a Fab City that is going to be permanent, with partners coming in, and really testing in the ground, working with the local communities, with the local council, with companies on how to make this future not only desirable, but making it possible. Thank you. So, what do we do now?
Just say good night.
Yeah. So
there's a lot to digest tonight.
There's a lot to digest. A lot to take. We invite you also to look on the 21st. We are going to reflect on what happened in the next week at the Fira of Barcelona and in 3industry event. That will be a nice moment in order for you to compare which are the things that we were saying today and after 6 days maybe.
Just want to remind you that all those people that talked tonight are part of this challenge. And we're not short on amazing ideas and math skills and experiences, and just really looking forward to let them get nuts and let them just express themselves and create new things. See what happens. There's one big exploration. I would like to thank you again. Thanks the whole team. Thank you, Ingi, Elga, Ignacio, Luciana, Kevin, Maria. Okay, now we'll say
about
goodbye to you for tonight. See you tomorrow morning for the participants. Don't forget.
But we still have some beers for people to drink.
Yes, don't
So
leave too
we have
soon.
some beers in the back. Yeah. Thank you.
Let the challenge begin.
Yeah. Cool.